He resides in New York and shares his heart with the Caribbean. He has worn many hats in his lifetime. He was a child, young adult performer with an impressive resume that left him many credits in commercials, voiceovers, television, stage, and motion pictures. He earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Communications in 1991 from St. John's University in New York City. In later years, he has found his place working in the financial industry. He is a comedian, loves singing and dancing, and is a talented cook. Philip has spent the last 34 years researching, learning, and embracing his history and culture to ultimately put it in book form to share with the world. With this work, he now adds another title, that of author. Philip Arnell is a man who has been blessed with all that life has to offer, a loving family, an endearing wife, and wonderful children. These have been his motivation to record his family history and thereby fulfill a promise made to his grandmother when he was 12 years old. With this book, he hopes to immortalize his ancestors both near and far, most of all, to unite his family globally. We also have his lovely wife, Paula Arnell, and his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Arnell, with us here at the Litfest. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Philip Arnell.
Good morning, everybody. How are you today?
Good morning.
Well, she gave a wonderful introduction for me, but I officially am going to say who I am. My name is Philip Timothy Arnell. Simply, I am a son, a brother, a husband, and a father. Very proud of all these things. And today, I can now add that I am an author. Thank you. The name of my book is Fortunate Member of a Caribbean Diaspora. It's a project that I started when I was 12 years old as a promise to my grandmother, right after my grandfather had passed away. I went over to the house and we were talking, and so we were just talking about family, people that we met, and so she says, you know, what you should do, why don't you write this stuff down, and this way we have a record of it. And I said, you know what, okay. Now, how many 12-year-olds do you know that are actually going to keep a promise all of their life, grow up with a project, and actually make something of it? I'm sure there's a lot, maybe there's a little. I know I'm happy to be one of them. As I said, fortunate member of a Caribbean diaspora. People say, what is a diaspora? And I'll say, well, basically, in short layman's terms, it's a person that is of one culture that migrated to another culture, or a person that is in that culture, growing up, or born in that other country, but still practicing their culture wholeheartedly. One person actually said to me, diaspora, sounds like something if you have an upset stomach. You automatically, look, I grew up as a child performer. I have a newsman's voice they've heard, and so I imagine somebody saying, when I have an upset stomach, I take a diaspora. Lighten them a little bit. What the book is about is the history of the... Yep. Thank you. Basically what it is a history of the families of St. Martin and Anguilla that go all the way back to the 1600s. I've had many different roads that I've taken. I was fortunate enough to get all of the different records from reliable sources. Also, in addition, from the age of 13, when I first came to this part of the world, interviewing the people who lived, walked, talked, ate, everything that you could do with somebody with all these ancestors. I had a great relationship with my grandparents. I have a great relationship with my parents, all four grandparents. I've learned so much through the years. Growing up in my family was a very unique experience. We have so many different types of people, all different walks of life. Diversity was always the key, but the main thing was, all right, some of us were born here, well, there in the States. My parents and grandparents always said, the one thing that someone cannot take away from you is your culture. Never let anyone take away your culture. I was always raised to be a very proud Caribbean American. My nationality is American and French. My culture is Caribbean. And I am proud to say that I'm beautifully blended with 11 different lineages. It's kind of like a world record. I wonder if I call them, would they actually put me in there for that? Would they believe me? I don't know, but we'll see. One of the greatest things about the culture, as any culture, is to have a good, strong work ethic. You have your family, you have your work. Family always comes first. You also have your work in order to sustain the family, or else they're not going to be there. From the time I was 2 years old, I can say that had that instilled in my mind, and I'm very grateful for it. I grew up as a child performer. I've done a lot of different things through the years. I was known as a triple threat. I could sing, I could dance, I could act. I did radio and television commercials. I even had part in earning an Emmy Award for a public service announcement on ABC television Saturday morning for Dr. Henry's Emergency Lessons for People, which is now on YouTube. And one of the best things I was able to do because of YouTube, show it to my children. Now we have 6 children. I have them with that beautiful woman over there. Paula, wave your hand. Okay. Now, for those of you watching this video, you'll notice that the head's been shaking. That's her way there. They range from 15, 14, 12, 11, 6, and going to be 5. As you can see, I'm really bad at math, but I know how to multiply. So. You guys are making me feel very comfortable. As you can see, I'm a little nervous up here, but let's just roll with it, okay? I was very fortunate to be brought up in this culture. In the house, it was literally in the cultures that represent the family. My mother is a very proud Barbadian American, totally immersed in that environment with my grandparents. Also, my father is born in St. Martin. My grandmother is from here. When I went over to their house, totally immersed in that as well. And here's the best part. I lived on 145th Street in Queens. My mother's parents lived on 144th Street in Queens. My father's parents lived on 142nd Street in Queens. All the places that I went, 1, 2, 3, we were exposed to so many different things, but home was always our base. Always remember, when you go out, remember who you are. We had to literally adapt into the society that's outside. And it's great. I am big on pop culture. It is something that has helped to mold the world, all different cultures. What I like about it is I was able to balance the two. I didn't have 2 personas. I was always the same. My middle name is Timothy. Everybody calls me Timmy. If you know me from that high, that's Timmy. Somebody calls, hello, may I speak to Timmy, please? Okay, this person knows me from a long time ago, and I have to wonder who this person is, and finally find out. You have a call name at home. This was always Timmy. My brother, his name is Fabian. Called him Pierre. Well, I would call him other choice words. That's what little brothers do. But what I've always liked, walk tall, hold your head high. The tallest person, this is going to sound weird, the tallest person that I ever knew in my life was 4 feet 11. Now you're wondering, how is it the tallest person that you ever met is 4 feet 11, especially when you're 6'2"? It was my grandmother, Stella Boyce. My father's mother, Cecilia Lamontaine Carty, was actually 5'5". She was big Nan because she was taller, and then we had little Nan who was shorter. And my grandfather's, my mother's father was shorter. My father's father was taller. These 4 people, I should say, were the tallest people for what they stood for, what they represented. My grandmother was a teacher here, one of the pioneers of the East End school system, Teacher Armentine Carty. Her sister, Laura Josita Carty, and her brother-in-law, Othniel Saunders, started this school system, and she was one of the 4 founding fathers or mothers of that school system up in the East End. These are things that I was able to research. I was able to go all the way back to the 1600s to posthumously meet my 6th great-grandfather. Now, this is indeed a family history log, but it's not just for this particular culture. It has been able to influence people globally, and that's something that I never knew would happen. It's been sold in 17 countries, even as far as China, as far as Brazil. People now, in this day and age, you have all the different mediums, RootsWeb, Ancestry.com, the commercials on television. You want to find out where your roots came from. People, non-related people to me, have bought this book and have given reviews on where it's being sold on, wow, I'm not a part of this culture, but reading this has inspired me to go into my background and find out who I am. I've been very, very lucky. When I first set foot when I first set foot in St. Martin, it was nighttime. All my cousins who I'd never met before, all first cousins, all gathered around. Hi. We traveled all day, 8 hours in Puerto Rico. I remember what I was wearing. I'm pretty good with remembering that kind of stuff. The next day, we stayed in Sucker Gardens. I got up the next morning. I said, let's see what St. Martin looks like. And I get up, and I'm outside, and I'm like, wow, this is really something. I'm up on top of a hill, but when you're 13 years old, it's a mountain, especially if you fall. So from that point on, I just started asking more questions. The earliest recollection of me asking questions was about a year and a half before my grandfather passed away. And I walked into the bedroom, and you see a picture of a guy who looked just like him with a big burly mustache, with a tuxedo and had a medal. And so I said, Pop, who's that fellow? That's my father. He told me a little bit about him. And then his mother was right there too. And I said, wow, this is great. So all these things I retained. And then when he passed, everything came to light. It has been an amazing journey. I grew up with this. I will grow old with this. And I share it with my children. All of my children know who's who. They're not going to remember everything like clockwork. 2 of them do, and the rest will, try talking to a 5 and a 6-year-old. They'll, what's on TV? One of the most important things that we can give to our families is a sense of their identity and, of course, a sense of their culture. And if you can influence any young people to do the same, I reflect back to a kid I knew. He was a trouble kid in school. And I knew his parents. And they came from a similar background like mine. But they did not seem to want to instill those mediums into this kid. And he was a friend of mine. And we talked. And this was now past the age of when I started this project. And I was telling him what I was doing. And I saw him recently, because we went to the same school in different walks of life. He's on my Facebook page. Says, I remember when we used to talk, and you talk about your family and see what you're doing now. You always inspired me to do better. And he's doing very well. And I'm still pleased to call him a friend after 30-something years. When you realize that you can reach out and touch somebody, that does mean everything. Now, I want to read a little bit of this book to you. And I have many different stories in it. The literary portion of this book talks about what it was like to grow up as a Caribbean diaspora. As I explained before, in the house was one country, outside of the house was another one, and also what it took to make this book. One of the most inspiring stories for me happened about 2001, 2002. I'm going to start off now. I was walking in Grand Cas St. Martin with my parents one afternoon. I noticed this lady across the street walking towards us. She looked very familiar because of her physical characteristics. She had a solid physique, red hair, freckles, which were a dominant and still are a dominant trait on my grandfather's side of the family. Both of my father's grandparents had freckles. His father had freckles. My father and his 4 siblings have freckles. The same 4 siblings have auburn to red hair. As a youngster, I knew my grandfather had red hair too. I asked my father if the woman looked familiar to him. He said, imitation is a greater form of praise, so I'm going to imitate you now, okay? Not really. I don't recall ever seeing her. With all the different people now living in St. Martin, it's almost impossible to tell who's from here anymore. This is how he acts, okay? Greatest form of praise, Dad. But I was curious, and I approached her. Excuse me, ma'am, are you originally from St. Martin? The soft-spoken woman replied, yes, I am. I said to her, with respect to your maturity, have you ever been in this area for a long time? She said, yes. I then said, who do you belong to? She said, I am of Lawn. My name is Celine Lawn. I asked, do you know someone named Carol Lawn who lives in French Cul-de-Sac? She says, yes, that's my brother. I said, really? I replied. I was just at his house visiting him about a half hour ago. Did you know someone by the name of Manon Arnell? Now, Manon Arnell is my grandfather, Gracian Emmanuel Arnell, but they know him as Manon, call names which I spoke about before. She said, yes, he was my cousin. I told her that he was my grandfather. Her face lit up. She said a few kind words, and she mentioned all the children's names. When she got to my father, she said, Fabi, which is short for Fabian. I interjected, and I pointed to my father, who was standing right next to me, and said, this is Fabi right here. She was so overwhelmed that she grabbed his head in disbelief, like an apple. You had to see this. And I was standing there like, good thing I'm tall, because she couldn't reach me. She was so overwhelmed that she grabbed his head in disbelief. They hadn't seen each other since 1946. She gave him a beautiful hug, and then she hugged my mother and me. Celine is a wonderful person who also provided me with a lot of information in regard to the Arnell family. She said something to me on our first meeting, and ironically, a few other people said the same thing to me. What she said was, we lived through the toughest of times, and we all made it through. These are strong words that represent a community which stuck together when life was a struggle in the 1920s and 30s, and perhaps for some, even as far up to the present. Personally, when I feel something isn't going right, or I feel I'm struggling, I think of those words. It gives me a different perspective on things. I too can make it through. Of course, my struggles are nowhere near the level of theirs and what theirs were. But nonetheless, they are struggles that I have to get through. That's an excerpt of the book. I have different stories on people that I've come across, that I've established relationships with and kept. And every day I think of the toughest of times, we all made it through. If you have a good family base and you have a culture that you're into that represents positivity, you will make it through it. Now we have had poets here past couple of days. I guess technically now I am one too. Would you like to hear a poem? Absolutely. Okay. Just putting it out there, I actually wrote this in under 20 minutes. I know. This is for my parents and for my whole family. Eternally, a Caribbean family. Across the horizons they traveled, whether stolen, despaired, or of free will. Landing on small pieces of earth, built communes where they barely had their fill. Active members of society, of all levels through determination, faith, and fortitude. Having the will to persevere, and sure to survive, no matter what the mood. Roots were planted, customs born, ways of life now a culture. From the dawn of each morn, centuries passed, from crippling poverty to a more substantial mean. They kept moving forward, their foresight not unseen. Came a time for some to branch out. They took their risks. They prepared to do without. Some went to isles nearby. Some chose the distance, float or fly. Some made it, some would die. They carried their ways and customs, blended their nose with society's new. They taught their offspring who, what, where they are from, and instilled that they are this too. As the generations passed, families grow in mass. They learn their family through their fame. But most of all, and don't ever forget, however new, how far from whence they came and to where they continue. Eternally a Caribbean family. I won't take up too much of your time, but I will leave you with this. In my years on this earth, up until the present time, I've always gotten the question, what are you? I simply say, I'm a child of God. A little smirk on my face. Then they say, well, why don't you elaborate? What is your background? I reply, well, it depends on what I'm standing in front of. I'm the wickedest of the three of my mother and father's children, so I think you kind of got that already. Then I stand up straight and I hold my head high and I simply say, I'm a very proud Caribbean American, a fortunate mirror of a Caribbean diaspora. I'm Philip Timothy Arnell. I hope you check out my book. You won't be disappointed. God love you all.